So welcome back to Rounds Rant, and today I am joined by professional golfer Ben Taylor, who is currently playing on the PGA Tour. Ben has won on the Corn Ferry Tour, while also was a part of LSU's Division 1 NCAA Championship winning team. So Ben, thank you very much for coming on the show. I know you've got a busy schedule, but how's life with yourself today?
Yeah, no worries, Richie. Thanks for having me on the show. Everything's good. Just arrived here last night in Moline, Illinois. We're here for the John Deere Classic, I should say, and just came in from Detroit. We drove down, a little easier than flying, so we're ready to get cracking with another week out here on the PGA Tour.
Good stuff. Yeah, well, there's quite a bit to unpack when it comes to your career and where you've reached, like right now, but it's the same if I have a musician on or an actor, whatever it may be, and especially with athletes, like what gravitated you towards the game of golf? Was it yourself? Was it a family member? Was it watching it? Like what got you into it in the first place?
So my dad, his name is Phil Taylor. He's a PGA professional.
Okay. Thought he was a
Has
darts
been a
player for
member.
a second.
He is known as Phil the Power, just not the same one. But my dad's been a member of the PGA now for 45 years, which is cool. He's now a master certified PGA pro, which is pretty cool. He was awarded that about 3 years ago for his basically lifetime of commitment to the PGA. Back in the 80s, before I was born, he was the assistant pro at Sunningdale
Okay.
in Surrey, which is where I grew up. Shortly before I was born, he bought a plot of land and built a public driving range and a 9-hole golf course. He wanted to teach newcomers to the game of golf, and basically my entire childhood was basically having my second home be a public driving range. So that was how I learned how to play. That's where I learned how to play from. And I think my parents had videos of me swinging a club and falling over because I hadn't quite learned how to walk and run yet. So golf's been in the blood since day one and has been ever since. Now I'm 31 years of age, and that's kind of what I've known to do since a very young age.
Yeah, sounds like you got in early, similar to my
Yeah,
upbringing. My dad got a club in front of me pretty quickly. And
yeah,
you took the route of going to the States for college and to pursue golf, obviously, and it's similar with, say, tennis players and stuff like that in the UK. They tend to go to the States. And as I mentioned in the intro, you won like national championships as part of a team. I think Bryson won the individual event that year as well, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah. He did, yeah, concession.
And yeah, so like when you get exposure to that and see some of the top college/amateur players around that time, and you can hang with them, so to speak, was that then your intention? You were like, right, I need to make this, a pro dream. I need to get on the tour. Or was there like a very specific moment, whether it was a meeting or going head to head with someone, that you thought, okay, I need to pursue this dream of being a pro?
Yeah, I was always very, very sporty. When I was younger, I played everything. Anything that kept me from doing something unsport related would encourage me to do something sporty. So I did everything. I even played ice hockey for 4 years. I was attracted to American sports from 8 years of age, even playing ice hockey. So like that's how I knew that there were sports out there that weren't big in where we grew up, where they were massive elsewhere. So we had really close family friends that lived in Michigan, and we used to flip-flop the summers. So we would go stay with them one summer. They would come and stay with us one summer because their kids were the same age as my sister and I. So, I got introduced to other sports other than just golf that were huge in the States. And I always kind of embraced being a little different as a kid because I was the one that played golf and everyone else did all the cool sports like football and rugby and tennis and yada yada. So, from a young age, I always had this interest in American sports, I guess you could say. And I would probably say post ice hockey days, when I was kind of 13 years of age, that's when Dad was like, you got to focus on one or two sports. You can't do all 9 of them.
Yeah.
So that's when I had to hang up the skates, and that was kind of when golf became a priority. And that was kind of the, mid-teenage years. I was a huge fan of Luke Donald, Paul Casey, guys Lee Westwood, all the big names in England were my role models, and a few of them had done that route to the States. So, take someone like Luke, for example. He was in the States for college. He went to Northwestern, he turned pro, and he'd basically been based there ever since. His wife is American, his family's all American. And that was when I knew I wanted to go to college. So, in the recruiting years, 15, 16, 17 was when it started to become a reality. And I remember going on a recruiting trip with my mum and dad to Fort Lauderdale, and we went to go visit a Division 2 school. It's called Nova Southeastern. And there was a guy on the team there who's a junior, is English. His name's Jack Bartlett. He's the one that does all the swing impersonations on social media.
I've seen a few of them.
Yeah, great fella, good friend of mine. And, I go and visit this school. Beautiful campus, brand new, not a massive school. I mean, the school had 6,000 students, which, coming from England, I went to Millfield, which was one of the largest schools in the country, and it was 1,500 students. So I went to this college and thought, bloody hell, this is massive. But you compare it to other big schools where they have 30, 40, 50, 60,000 students. It was, talk about a culture shock. So yeah. I went to go visit this school. I liked Jack, we were good friends, and we're playing around palm trees, beaches, shorts and bikinis. And we're thinking, I think this will be a comfortable fit for me to start college. So that was kind of the age and the transition and the reasons why I went to Nova. And then obviously had some success there, and that's what led me to think, do you know what, if I'm going to pursue a career professionally, I need to play collegiate at the highest level. So that's when I transferred to Division 1 and went to LSU from there. So that was kind of the journey and the transition coming to the States.
Yeah, and it's quite a competitive field when it comes to college. My brother currently lives in Florida and he's off +2, +3, but he knows a lot of the up and coming golfers, and he knows how tough it is and competitive it is. And when you make that step to eventually going on to the Corn Ferry Tour, and for people maybe who don't know, that's kind of the difference between the Premier League and the Championship. The Corn Ferries, where you get your cards, or at least get the opportunity to get your card on the PGA Tour. And you've done that now a few years. You've obviously got your card now, but the Corn Ferry Tour, a lot of people say how tough it is, because the step up, or maybe the lack of step up between that and the PGA Tour, it's closer than many people think. But what were some of the challenges, because you've had a few years on the Corn Ferry before your eventual kind of promotion to the PGA Tour? What were some of the tough parts of that, where you had to go through proper hardships? I know you had success on the Corn Ferry, but what were, say, some of the unseen events that you had to go and overcome?
Yeah, I mean, when I look back at highest level of golf amateur wise in the UK, in Europe, all the big amateur events representing England, or collegiately in the States, you don't go out there and you're not 5 under through 9 and on your way to shoot 4 low rounds in the 60s. You shoot 69, you're gonna prove a point in any of these tournaments we play. And the biggest thing for me, you go to the Corn Ferry Tour, and admittedly some of the venues you play is the reason why, but you go to some of these events and you can shoot 20 under par and you're not going to sniff winning the tournament. And it's you go to college and you shoot they play 3-round tournaments, but you shoot 3 sub-70 rounds, you're probably going to win. And whether you're playing a championship level golf course, or you're playing a golf course that is a little less demanding, you're going to feature in the tournament. Whether you go to the Corn Ferry Tour, I mean, I've had weeks where I've been 5, 6, 7 under par through 2 rounds and I've missed the cut. And talk about a wake-up call to, not just amateur golf to professional, but the demand of the Corn Ferry Tour. That was the level. That's how deep the water was that you got thrown into. And I mean, it only helped your competitive edge, help elevate your career to the next level, because you're thinking geez, a good round isn't good enough out here. It's got to be a really good round. And 2018 was my first win on the Corn Ferry Tour. I won in Colombia. I won the Colombian Open, and I shot 15 under par. The course is super quirky, super old school, not a lot of drivers, and you're playing at like 8,500 feet, so the ball's going miles. I mean, literally over 200 yards, it'll go 20% further, so it's really hard to get it close to the hole. And I think that week, you know, from our roots of playing golf where you don't shoot super low, you know, you're playing on natural terrain that's not gonna, that could give you unfair bounces. You've got to really navigate around a golf course that's not like a true American test. That was something that was advantageous to me. So when I went out on the Corn Ferry Tour, I had to really take advantage of the weeks where you're not going to go and shoot super low, because it's not just whale driver down there as far as you can and stuff an 8-iron or less in and make as many birdies as you can. So I kind of learned that my first year out there, because my first year I finished just outside the number that retains your full card. So I had to go back to final stage of Q school. I still had good Corn Ferry status, but not full. So I had to go back to final stage just to regain that. And actually never forget, it's funny actually, I was even par after 2 days at Q school, and I was in like 116th position, and it takes the top 40 in ties to regain full status. And I didn't have a low score all year, and I had my best friend Mitch on the bag, and we went and shot 62, 63 to finish 17 under, to finish 17th to regain my full status. And I'm thinking, like, Christ, where was that score during the year when you wanted to have a good weekend, and you know? And it's funny how that works. You know, you have a whole year on the Corn Ferry Tour and you don't shoot the scores you want, and then when it really matters at Q school on a golf course that feels a bit easier than the challenges you're used to, suddenly, boom, you go shoot those scores. But after that first year, when I sort of gained some experience, I won the Colombian Open, and that year I didn't even get my PGA Tour card. I mean, I won the 4th event of the year. Come the end of the season, I finished 28th on the Order of Merit, and it took 25. So, you know, a lot of people don't realise. They think, oh, yeah, you win out there, you're on tour. And you go, well, no, you've got to win and have a third place and make a load of cuts, because that's how it is. Someone out there is going to go and win a few and get promoted, and it's like a mini tour on steroids. The scores out there are like mini tour scores, but all the players are good enough to, you know, have careers out on the PGA Tour. So it was a huge learning curve for me.
Yeah, sounds like it. And like this season on the PGA Tour, you've had like several top tens. You've had some really good showings, but like the Corn Ferry Tour as well. Just to focus in on that just a little bit more, like nearly not so much socially or emotionally, but like even like financially, when you're digging that out, because obviously the payments get bigger and the rewards get bigger once you get exposure on the PGA Tour, and even with sponsorships and stuff like that. But like, is it a case where like you're all in, like even like financially, you're taking risks, you're even maybe in the red for a few months, just kind of investing on yourself to, you know, make it big, which obviously eventually you did.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say relatively fortunate. I think I deserved it, but when I turned pro, I signed with Titleist. That's what I always wanted to be with. Played 14 clubs with Titleist for almost 20 years. So I got a very small signing bonus with Titleist that kind of got me going. And I'll never forget, I turned pro, I get out there with a small lump of cash. I think I went over with like $25,000 or something. And then I leased a car for the first year that cost me $7,000. You're paying $750 a month to rent somewhere to live. And then you go and play these events, and you're spending $500 on a flight to get there. Your caddy for the week for minimal is $1,200 out there on the Corn Ferry Tour, and you got your expenses for the week, and you got to fly yourself to the next one. And I'm thinking, like, Christ, you know, I've got not a lot to my name, and I'm making the cut and making $2,000, but then the week's cost me $3,000. And that was interesting, because my whole first year on tour, you know, you first turn pro, you first like actually managing your own bank account, and you see $20,000, and you're like, oh man, I'm rich, you know, this is way more than I'm used to. But then you look back at it now and you go, geez, if only I knew how quickly that would have run out. You're literally just gambling with what little asset you have, and you just have to keep going until you either can let the snowball effect keep going, and you go and play more events or until you run out. And I was fortunate that I had a little bit of a head start like that, because some guys sign for millions, they sign for hundreds of thousands, and they have no idea what it's like to think, well, I'm going to go and play for 6 months, and once I run out, I'm done. And the Corn Ferry Tour, one of the best things about the Corn Ferry Tour is I've met so many friends for life, where they took me in, they let me stay at their houses, they would use their miles to fly you to the next event, or they treat you like family. And I got married 3 months ago, and it was cool for me to have a lot of the host families that looked after me on the Corn Ferry Tour all meet each other. They were sitting at the same table, and they all got to share silly stories of the shenanigans that I was up to the week I was staying at their homes, and they all got to get to know each other, which was really cool. It's obviously not the same as that on the PGA Tour, but you got to do what you got to do. You're ducking and diving all the time, at least at the start, and you're very grateful for those that kind of help you along the way. So it was an independence builder playing the Corn Ferry Tour, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Sounds a bit like one or two of the musicians I've had on when they were stuck in the van at an early age before the planes and private jets came in, when the success came in. So
exactly.
It's understood. And with the PGA Tour this year, Ben, you, like, in your first 8 starts, you made 7 cuts. You had multiple top 5s and some big events. But what, I suppose, it might not sound like it was a big adjustment considering there was initial success for you there. But the PGA Tour, whether it's course related, whether it's maybe even media commitments made, even if it's having to play with major championships on a Thursday, championship winners on a Thursday, what were some of the, if you want to be that aggressive with the terminology, culture shocks from going from the Corn Ferry Tour to the PGA Tour? What were some of the stuff that kind of caught you off guard, or maybe just even surprised you as you played?
So that makes me think of 2019, when I first got my PGA Tour card. And then you go out in the fall, you get no break. You get 1 week off after the Corn Ferry season, then boom, you start the wraparound season in the fall. And I'll never forget going out there. And you go on the driving range, and at the Corn Ferry Tour events, you would have the Titleist trailer, Callaway, TaylorMade, Trixon, you'd have all the reps for each brand. So on the range, you would have the players, the caddies, a couple of coaches where players are lucky enough to bring them, and there might be 10 reps total. And it seems busy. You get out to a Corn Ferry event, and when you haven't been on that tour before, it feels like a big deal, and it feels busy. Well, then you go to the PGA Tour and you go to the range, and there's probably 100 reps, because there's twice the faculty from each company. There's even more companies out there, grip companies, putter companies, clothing companies. And then you got all the agents. So you go out there, and the distractions and the number of bodies that are in your way to get what you want doing at each event times by 10. And it was very easy to get sucked into that, because everybody wants to meet the new rookie. They want to befriend them. They want to schmooze them up in case they get a hot start. Suddenly they might be able to be associated with them. And, I would like to describe myself as pretty middle of the road in terms of personality. I'm always going to be smiley, say hello to people, meet friends, do the right thing. But it's very easy on the PGA Tour to get sucked into all of the nonsense that isn't going to make you play any better. But you're just embracing what that level of golf has to offer, which is basically all the freebies, all the entourage, all the interactions. And it's tough enough as it is. You go out on the putting green, and if you don't make a point to, own a hole on the putting green and set up whatever drills you want or whatever stations you need to knock out the reps you want to feel comfortable for the week, there will be a player with a caddy and a coach and a trainer and a mentor and a friend and a dad and an agent that will just get in your way. And it's a funny old environment, the PGA Tour, because that is just normal every single week. And then you go to the elevated events, the majors, and it's 10 times worse than that. So it's a different game, and you got to own your intentions out there. Otherwise, all the distractions can just own you, in my opinion. And I was a little unlucky, slash, maybe a bit fortunate, because when I first got my card was year one of the two COVID years where we had like a repeat season,
Yeah.
and it was super tough for me because obviously being in the rookie category, you should get at least 25 tournaments out of the 40, and I got 18 my first year because we had that 3 month break, and that was even after a decent start. And then the repeat year came, and even though I had a full year without a 3 month break, I only got into like 17 events the second year. So it was nice to have 2 years, which was an experience builder. But each season, I didn't have enough events unless I won one, which was unlikely in that position. I was never going to keep my card, so that's when I had to go back to the Corn Ferry Tour and regain it. But I look back and think that was good experience to at least be chasing the 8 ball and just be the rookie that no one cares about for 2 straight years, and basically never have any never have anything go your way was what actually really helped me get to the next level. So it's a different environment. I have a lot of people go, they think back in the European Tour days when all the boys travel to Spain together and they're going do nice dinners together, have some banter, joke around, prank each other, and that stuff is I think still very common on the DP World Tour, because I know guys out there and that's how they seem to act with one another. But the PGA Tour is totally different. You go and play a dining. If there's a free table, that's where someone would go and eat. They're not going to go sit with someone and socialise because they're probably on their AirPods, FaceTiming their family or their agent, and it's a very antisocial environment. I got to be honest. So you learn that pretty quick, and you accept that's what it's like. That's the nature of the tour, and you just crack on with it. I mean, you're not gonna change it anytime soon. So that was probably, as you described, a big culture shock, and that was one thing you had to get your head around pretty quick and just kind of get on with it.
Yeah, and it is something that we sometimes do forget. It is a very individual sport. I know you've got your caddies and coaches and whatnot, but ultimately it's you swinging the ball and you trying to hit it to where you anticipate. But with all that said, and maybe some of the coldness that you experience, whether it's in the practice areas or in the restaurants and these clubhouses, was there a moment at all during a round or even a practice round where you get exposure to play with some of the best players in the world?
Yeah.
Like regularly, was there times like when you first got on the tour that whether it was a certain player or maybe even a player reached out to you and said, here, listen, this technique for practice or this course management technique, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Did you take any of that in, or were you kind of like backing yourself to do it your way?
No, for sure. I mean, obviously, kind of only listed all the negative things about the tour, but I've been very fortunate. I have the same coach as Keegan Bradley, Darren May. He's English, and Keegan's been like he's kind of taken me under his wing a little bit. Any events we have together, we'll play with each other. So he's been awesome. I mean, I get to communicate with him regularly. He's always responds to me. He's always there for me if I have any questions. Same as Brendan Steele. I met Steely through Keegan, and talk about the ideal ambassador to the PGA Tour. Brendan Steele is as clean as they come, and I think it's no surprise that he's had some success recently. And guys like that, you go play practice rounds with, and you suddenly start to feel like you've got some mates out there. You've got people that have your best interest at heart, because they're the ones that will text you when you have a couple bad weeks and they try and pick you up, and they're not just part of the gang that will call you or text you when you've had a top five and they want to maybe embrace the celebration with you. But them two boys have been awesome. I've gotten to know Luke Donald pretty well over this season, and I got a funny story about him actually. So I was at the USPGA this year, first USPGA, first major as a pro, and gotten to know him pretty well. Obviously, I've known him now for 7 years or so. This year, I think finally been able to sort of start a bit of a friendship. And I was struggling a little bit with my pitching. Super wet out there. It was kind of hard to perfect the strike. So I thought to myself, I was like, he was on the chipping green with me. It was just me and him, and I thought, he won't mind. I'm just going to go and ask him, pick his brains for 5 minutes. So I ask him a little question on just how to help with my strike. So he totally takes 5 minutes out of his practice, has a little look, gives me some help. You know, super nice of him. So I'm thinking, oh, that's nice, you know, get a little tip, something that, you know, same thing I'm working on, but you just hear it from a different perspective. And when you hear it from
Yeah.
the guy that has the best short game in the world, you're going to listen and you're going to believe that that's going to help you. So I'm like, oh, thanks, Lou. He goes, yeah, no problem. He walks behind me and goes in the bunker and starts hitting bunker shots. And there's probably like 50 people around the chipping green, and there's a bunch more all by the autograph tunnel on the other side of the chipping green. And the very first bunker shot, he completely sculls it and flies it over the green like 50 yards, shouts for, the ball hits the railing and then hits the spectator. And we're all laughing because I'm like, I just got some help from the guy, the best short game in the world, who then knifes it out the bunker. And as it hits this guy, not very hard, he turns around and Luke just points at me, and he's in the bunker. And of course, this fan isn't going to think that it was Luke. And I'm like, you bastard! They're so going to think that was me now, aren't they? And I thought that was quite cool. It's funny how you know, Luke's obviously got a lot of responsibilities this year, being Ryder Cup captain, and I wish him all the best. And he's obviously had a very, very busy year because he's had to play a lot more than I'm sure he has done in the last couple of years. So for him to take 5 minutes out of his practice to help me, and then we have a bit of a laugh out of it, was a cool moment. And it's situations like that where, you know, it can be a lonely industry to be in, but you have moments like that that make it all worth it. And you have weeks which are successful. You have weeks where you learn a lot. You have weeks that are really good. You have weeks where, you know, your family can make it. My wife flies in on Friday this week. I've not seen her for 3 weeks. And she's going to fly with me to Scotland. So, you know, you have weeks where it certainly makes it a lot more worth it. And you have weeks that make you appreciate how lucky you are. And, you know, I've worked my whole life to be here, so bad weeks aren't going to bring me down. I may complain about it, but it's not going to stop me doing what I want to do. And little moments like that just make me laugh because you think, you know, when I was a kid and I didn't know Luke, I would never have thought I would have had a situation like that on the chipping green at a major championship and just laughed when he blamed me for hitting a fan out the bunker. But that's what professional golf brings you, and it's situations like that where you can actually be very grateful of what we get to do for a living. Put it that way.
Yeah. Oh, I can see that. He's got a reputation to uphold
Oh,
and can't be seen
yeah,
as the leader of the European
that's
team
right.
shanking balls into crowds.
Yeah.
So I get it. But with, say, yourself, you were saying there just even about tips and practice, like yourself, whether it's what your coach tells you to do or what you want to do or the caddy or whatever it may be, like how do you approach reviewing your performance? Because as you've said there, like you've had a mixed season. You've had a great start to it, like third places, fourth, fifth places, and then there's been miscuts. So you've got a taster of the good weeks and bad weeks. Like how do you review your performances? Because you're just outside, say, the top 100 players in the world at the moment. Are you stats driven where it's like all about strokes gained, greens and regulation, or like how do you review yourself as a golfer after the good and bad weeks to hopefully improve?
That's a good question, actually. I do look at the strokes gained and the stats quite a lot. A lot of it is situational. So, like, you know, the Travellers, I missed the cut 2 weeks ago, but I was number one strokes gained putting. So someone's going to go, oh wow, you know, you're the best putter on tour this week. And I'm thinking, well, I know I am one of the top 10 best putters on tour, but when you're missing a lot of greens and you're not hitting it very close, like in regulation, and you're holding a lot of par putts, like you're gonna be stroke gain the best putter because it goes off of how many putts you hole per green in regulation. So when you're not hitting very many green in regulations, like you're going to be better than everyone else. So stats, yes, I look at, but they're always skewed. If you're number one, strokes gain tee to green, you're not going to be number one putting strokes gained. It's impossible. I mean, it's not impossible, but if you were, you'd win the tournament by 15 shots. So, like,
Yeah.
I take it with a pinch of salt because a lot of it's very situational. Um, Recently, I've tried to kind of shift my mindset with that because it's easy to judge your performance and review the results you've had just on where you finish in the tournament. And listen, it's no, obviously a reality I've accepted that the last couple of months hasn't gone very good, but it doesn't mean I'm not playing very well. There's just a few things that need tweaking, and then we should be up and running again. And I've tried to approach my evaluation lately on just how I feel my game is, and not judging it on statistically or where I'm finishing in the tournament. So, to answer your question, like right now, I feel like I'm starting to swing it a little better. I'm focusing on a few things that takes away worrying about the technical stuff too much, and I'm just trying to improve certain areas of my game little by little every day. And let the performance in the tournaments just start to improve on their own, because it is very easy to dig yourself a grave quickly, and you have 2 or 3 missed cuts in a row, and then you start questioning why you're missing cuts, and it's like, well, you could have made 3 cuts in a row on the number and put yourself in a false mindset of thinking that you're playing good, and actually you're not. You just made 3 cuts in a row as opposed to missed 3 cuts. You could be playing exactly the same. So I've tried to, maybe take a little bit easier on myself, is a better way of describing it, when you have a few weeks where you're not quite posting the scores you want to, because golf's an interesting sport. You could miss 6 cuts in a row and then you can go and win, or you could win and you could go and miss 60 cuts in a row. I mean, it's you never know what's around the corner, and I think when you have an open mindset like that, I think that's when it's a little bit more bearable when you have a few weeks in a row of missing cuts. So that's how I look at it. I try not to get too wrapped up in all the information out there, all the data. I just think it's easy to get worked up about it. And I just try to put a lid on it when you have a bad week and just move on to the next one.
Yeah, and a lot's been made recently about the ebbs and flows of form, and I think there last weekend you saw with where the weekend just gone, Ricky Fowler finally getting back into the winning circle, where he's been playing great recently, and he just changed coach back to Butch Harmon, who was his previous coach. But with yourself, do you have a big team? Do you have one coach, no coach? Like, how does that work with you? And then also, like, as you kind of alluded to there, if you're having a bad week, do you want your coach to have the solution to the problem, or is it more just a mental thing? Because that's what Butch Harmon said about like Ricky. He was just like, to be honest, it was just like less is more with Ricky. Get back to basics. Like, what's your kind of coach-player relationship, or if you do have one? At all?
I mean, I work with Darren May, who's my primary coach. I also get a lot of help from my best friend Mitch Farrer. Mitch has been my best mate for 15 years. He coaches up in Columbus, Ohio, and they're both English, which I like. They both know what helps me as a player. Like, I'm not a, when you play bad, go and reconstruct your golf swing. Both of them, similarly to Butch, would know not to be too hard on yourself. It's not something that needs fixing instantly with some technical improvements. It'll just be having to tighten the screws, maybe shift how you're thinking about things, because you look at someone like Ricky Fowler, and people have criticised him about being in a slump, not playing good. Is this the end of his career? Like, all this nonsense. Yet the guy has been top 50 in the world the whole time everybody's said those things, and it's like, he is that close to winning a tournament and probably getting in the Ryder Cup team, and you just laugh at some of the criticisms. And I put myself in a similar situation. I mean, obviously I've had some success this season, all came in the first third, and now we're going through a transition of trying to create those results again. And I think when I talk about it with my team, we all know that it's mostly between your ears. You know that the swing you've got isn't going to change week to week. You need a couple of weeks in the off season to make changes like that. So going from tournament to tournament, a lot of it is just very situational and playing with what you got and just trying to produce the best results and know that you can do it with what you got. So For sure, I would agree with that totally. A lot of it is, you know, the attitude you have towards it. I think can create results a lot more powerfully than it can be working on technical stuff. So, um, yeah, that's a huge part of it. And I think maybe Ricky, um, reiterating on the things that he had that gave him success in the past is just been no surprise why he's gone and had his first win in 4 years or whatever it was. I mean, that's cool to see because it's that's the beauty of golf. Is that is a very powerful skill to have, and it just goes to show that whether you're someone trying to keep their card, someone that's having the best year they've had so far, or somebody that's a multiple PGA Tour winner, that skill to have is obviously very similar. So all credit to him. That was cool to see.
Yeah. Big fan of Ricky's, to be fair. Albeit I had a few close calls in majors and Paddy Power ended up winning. But yeah, hopefully maybe in the British Open or something you can pay the faith. But with regards then, just to, I haven't asked about it, but the caddy-player relationship is obviously huge. And I think ever since maybe Steve Williams and Tiger became this nearly duo as opposed to just the one player, became that team element. Like, how important is the role in the modern day golfer of the caddy? Like, as in, are they pretty much your coach to reset you after a bad shot? Do you, like, personally speaking, do you like a caddy who's quite aggressive, who says, no, it's a 7, not an 8 iron? Like, how do you find that relationship between, like, you and your caddy, and also from what you see in others on tour? Like, how vital
it's funny
is it?
because I spend more time with my caddy than I do with my wife. I mean, we play 30 events a year, and we're on the golf course. I don't know, we're out there from anywhere from 5 to 8 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. So, like, you're with that person a long, long time. And I'm a player that, if I had a caddy that was adamant on telling me what clubs to hit and being quite stubborn, that won't work for me. I'm very accountable for my own actions. I like to evaluate things myself and talk them through a caddy like they would be a teammate. That's where I've had my success in the past. My caddy, his name's Robert Peeler, so I call him Peeler. Super great guy. He's very mellow. He's a few years older than I am, so he kind of is very level-headed. Like, what you see is what you get. He's never going to walk any quicker or any slower, whether you're leading a tournament or missing the cut by 10. He's just, nothing phases him. He's as cool as a cucumber for the most part. And he's been on my bag since last year in April or March, I think. So we've done almost a year and a half together now, and it's an interesting dynamic because you have to understand what works for you, because there are some players out there that need a caddy that will literally tell them what to do every single hole, and that's just what makes them work. And then you have others that literally want a caddy that will solely carry the bag and just, like a human sponge, will just soak in all the criticism that comes their way, and that's what makes the player tick. And it's interesting because unless you play enough to gain the experience and learn what's right for you, you don't know. I mean, unless you just completely luck out and have a caddy from the start that just ticks all the boxes for you. So it's a very interesting partnership because they come in all different shapes and sizes, and they're all completely different to one another. And you just got to learn what works for you. So that's what seems to work for me. I've got a lot of respect for Peeler. He's caddied for 10 years, kind of 50-50 between the Corn Ferry and the PGA Tour. And, we've had a lot of success together, and we've also had a lot of terrible weeks too. We kind of just soak it in together and move on to the next one, which is sort of what we're doing now. So, it's interesting. It's refreshing when you have somebody that's there for you every single week, when they're obviously, caddies nowadays are paid well. This caddy life of living penny to penny and slumming it and not being fed. I mean, that doesn't exist anymore. Caddies get great buffet breakfast and lunch. They're paid well enough to pay for their flights, their cars, their accommodation, and they're gonna they're going to be in the plus every week if you miss the cut. So obviously their percentages is where they make all their money. And it's refreshing when you have a run of weeks where you're not doing very well and you're not rewarding your caddy with the big paydays, and they're sticking by you and believing that that's just around the corner. So, yeah, it's interesting. I've never thought I would have, a friend that's also a full-time employee. That's not. It's not a. It's not a. You're not employing them by contract. It's just a handshake deal, and you honour what you commit to. And yeah, I've been lucky to have Peeler that's been very loyal to me, and I don't even need to speak to him. I know that when I get there on Monday morning, he'll be there. So it's an interesting partnership. It's funny how it works sometimes, but yeah, caddy player in golf. It's not like any other sport, that's for sure.
Yeah, true. And also, just when I was having you on, the amateurs and bandits like myself, being the 8 handicapper that I am, they flooded a lot of questions about the typical questions that would come towards a pro. But you, as I said, you've been surrounded by some of the best golfers you've ever seen, probably some of the worst, maybe some who think they're class but they're absolutely terrible. Like when it comes to the social golfers, say even like 5 or 10 handicappers, some people say distance is the key, some people say it's short game, some say it's practice and how they actually practice at the range. Like if you had a tip, and I know it's quite hard because one size definitely does not fit all on the golf course, but like traditionally or typically what do you see that maybe amateurs and lowish handicappers, what mistakes are they making, whether it's on the course or in their practice?
2 things, and it's going to shock you. The first thing is none of those guys ever practice their short games as much as they should do. So they might hit the ball good one day and then they putt and chip terribly, so they don't shoot the score they want. And I'm always like, well, when do you practice your short game? Well, I'll hit balls for an hour and then I'll just hit 3 putts and go at the first tee. And I'm like, well, so now you wonder why your bunker play's rubbish, or you duff chips, or you can't get up and down when you miss a green on the right side of the pin. And no one ever practices their short game because it's not as fun as hitting balls on the range. And I'm like, short game isn't like getting a swing lesson where there's something that, is what you need to do and you just work on it continually week after week. Short game is 90% skill and feel, and you only learn that through practicing. So I'm like, no one ever practices their short game, and then they wonder why it's not any good, or when they're playing badly, it doesn't help them, or when they're playing good, that's the part that lets them down. And I tell you what, it sounds crazy, but all amateurs, whether they are 5 handicap or 25 handicap, the amount of times I see them, and I'm always off the tips, right? I'm always playing on the back tee. So when I play pro-ams, I'm walking towards their tee, so I'm always watching them from behind because I'm always walking down the tee box and they're teeing off. No one, I would say 80% of all amateurs I play with are never aiming in the right direction. And I always say to them, like, they'll be aiming way right and they'll have a big carving, slicey swing. And they have a big carving, slicey swing because they're aiming right and they're trying to compensate. And then they're always like, God, I came over the top of that one. Or it went right. And I'm like, have you ever seen where you're aiming the ball? No. Like, how do you do that? And I'm like, well, you just lay down a club or a stick when you're on the range, which doesn't take any effort or any skill whatsoever. You literally just put it on the ground. And if you do that every day when you warm up, or even once a week, you're going to train yourself so that you know your perception and where you think you're aiming and where you actually are. And no one ever goes, oh yeah, I just assume that I have this skill where I can just aim at the target like I think I am. And I'm like, well, you never are aiming in the right direction. I said, golf is a hard enough sport. We're hitting a round ball with a flat face. So if you're not aiming in the right direction, it's just sheer luck if you hit it in the direction that you're intended to hit it in. So literally nobody aims in the right direction. And I tell you what I think it is in the States. In England, the amount of driving ranges are square mats. We have mats and we don't have grass. So mats are square. Some of them have the fancy crosses on them. Some of them don't. Some of them do, whatever. But the mat is square. So human nature, you're going to stand on a square mat and you're going to see the direction it's pointing and you're going to start hitting balls in the direction that the mat's pointing. Well, in America, the grass is so good. You're always hitting off of grass ranges, and you're in a bay that doesn't have anything that's giving you an indication of where that bay is set up to go. So people don't realise this, and I'm like, you could probably shave a few points off your score, a few shots, if you actually aim, or at least know where you're aiming. And it baffles me. And I've said this, everyone always is shocked when I say this. And I'm like, well, imagine if Roger Federer was playing at Wimbledon, and rather than facing his opposition, which is the direction he's hitting it, he stands sideways. He's probably not going to get a rally going if he's not aiming in the right direction. I'm like, golf is the same. I ain't going to hit it towards the pin if you're aiming in the trees. And mate, it baffles me. And every time I say, do you ever like put something down to help you aim in the right direction? They go, no. Well, it's easy. Just stand here and you're hitting that way. And I'm like, well, yes, but it's a game of inches here, so we need to aim in the right direction. And mate, it's shocking. Would love to just video what my eyesight looks like when I watch 4 amateurs tee off from behind, and you just see where they're aiming and you just know where it's going. And I'm like, I say, golf's hard enough, let alone when you're not aiming in the direction that you intend to hit the ball. So, you know, that honestly, as dumb as it sounds, mate, that I'm telling you, that is the biggest thing I see.
That's a fair point. As a guy who used to aim 30 yards left to compensate my size, I know all too well of the trials and tribulations of an amateur bandit.
Fixing a wrong with a wrong. It's like if you aim straight, you're not going to slice it. It's going to go way too far right. Then you're going to start realising how to square that face. And I'm telling you, mate, it's so funny. Yeah. I mean, I thought I aimed wrong sometimes. And then you see that and you go, bloody hell, help them.
Yeah, it increases your morale as a pro golfer, I'd imagine. And so just listen I know obviously we're tight on time here, Ben, so just one of the last things I wanted to ask you before I just fire off a few quick fire and then you can go get some practice in. With yourself now, as I said, you're just outside the top 100 in the world. Do you have a particular goal? Like, do you do short-term goals? Is it just week to week? Like, I know, say, the British Open is around the corner. Some people are over qualifying while you're here doing the John Deere. Like, do you have short-term, mid-term goals, or are you just kind of a happy-go-lucky? If I play well, great. If I don't, I don't. Or is there core goals that you want to achieve?
What I like to do is I like to... I wouldn't necessarily call them goals. I set myself small objectives that are very achievable, which are things I can control that would, contribute towards a long-term goal, which for me is top 50 in the world. So, that to me is my long-term goal. I'm going to achieve that from a handful of objectives that I have that I've come up between me and my coaches. I like to do things that you can control. I mean, I learned from a young age, if you set a goal that's more of a dream and you don't achieve it every year because you don't know the things you need to do to achieve it, it can be quite degrading. So, I like to keep myself in the present, just do the objectives I can achieve that will help me get to my long-term goal, which is top 50 in the world. So, I'd obviously love to be in the Open in a couple of weeks. I've done one before, which was at St Andrews. I qualified as an amateur back in 2015. So I can't remember what exactly the criteria is for me in my category, but hopefully a good couple of weeks would take care of that, which would be really cool. My dad's from Southport originally, so being able to play at Hoylake would be cool to be back near his roots. So that obviously is a short-term ambition, and hopefully we can have a good couple of weeks here and try and achieve that. Would be really nice.
Okay, so watch that space. And so listen, Ben, what I normally do is just ask a few questions, quick fire, shoot off, first thing you can think of. So first one I had here was favourite golf course in the world.
It's a tough question, that is. There is a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot.
That is a tough one. I think it would still be... it's a golf course in France. It's called Les Bordes. My dad used to be a member when I was a kid, and it's just heaven on earth. We used to drive there from England. It'll take us like 6 hours and spend the long weekends there. It's just It's golfer's heaven in France, called Les Bordes.
Okay. If you could make a perfect golfer consisting of putting, chipping, iron play, driving, and mentality, what players would you
Keegan
pick?
Bradley driving, iron play. Not sure who I pick for iron play. That's a toughie. Short game, Luke Donald. Putting, I would say Jordan Spieth. Long putting. Spieth putting, Luke Donald short game, iron play. I'd hold myself up there with their own, and driving Keegan for sure. Mentality.
And then mentality?
Tiger Woods, hands down. No, that's an obvious one.
Debate that. The strangest thing you've ever seen on a golf course?
Strangest thing on a golf course. Christ, there's so many I can't even remember. God, that's a good question, mate. You put me on the spot. Strangest thing on the golf course.
Yeah. Mine was seeing two 14-foot alligators
At Stream Song
sitting on a par 3 green.
Strangest thing on the golf course.
Which kind of shook me as an Irishman, to be honest.
2 years in Louisiana, I know what that feels like. Christ, strangest thing on the golf course.
Yeah.
Actually, I've got a funny story about this. It's a little unorthodox. My mate Mitch, when we lived at Champions Gate, which is in Orlando, I lived there before I moved down to Jupiter. We knew all the staff there. So we were playing around the golf just with our mates having fun. And the beverage cart girl comes up. So Mitchy decides to take the beverage cart for a spin. He just drives it down the hole, brings it back. Well, he's driving back towards us, and as he gets up the hill and he's driving the car on an angle, the front wheel hits the side of the cart path, and he flips the beverage cart. He flips it on its side. All the booze goes everywhere. He's probably cost himself $500 worth of booze, and he had to go and fix the golf cart and apologise to the club. I would never thought I'd see someone flip a beverage cart on the golf course, but there you go. I've seen that. That's probably the strangest thing I've seen.
There we go. And second last thing, what is the worst? Cleaning the dishes, hoovering the house, or changing the bed sheets?
Bed sheets. Pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the top one.
Miserable.
Most people go for the bed
Take
sheets.
hoovering over that any day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. The non-talent is where we're at. And yeah, so last thing, Ben, if you could ask yourself a question that I haven't asked you today, what would it be?
Golf on.
My last guest said, what's for dinner?
Could be non-golf related. I'll tell you what.
It can be anything, yeah.
I was surprised you didn't ask if I had any superstitions and what they were. Everybody always asks if you've got any superstitions. I used to, not anymore. But I was surprised you didn't ask if there's any superstitions. That would have been one that wouldn't have surprised me. Superstition. I used to always put 9 T's in my pocket.
You got rid of it.
Only ever 9 T's. I'll walk to the first tee and count, make sure I only have 9 T's in my pocket. I don't quite do that anymore because it got to the point where I break so many, I kept having to grab another 9, and, with a few holes to go. But yeah, if I had any superstitions, would have been a question I would have asked that you didn't.
Okay. Super stuff. Well, listen, Ben, that wraps it up. Yeah, I know I've got a busy week, so I wish you all the best in the coming weeks because the PGA Tour does not stop. And yeah, thanks for being so kind with your time. And yeah, listen, I wish you all the best in the coming events, and hope to see you climb up those. Yeah,
that's the plan, mate. Richie, thanks so much for having me on the show, mate. All the best, and we'll chat to you soon.